Are we lucky with the candidates that we have, with the Biden v Trump debate hitting the headlines for all the wrong reasons? And the SNP finally unveil a battle bus. But is it too little, too late? I'm Lorna Hughes, and joining me today is Quinn and Hannah Rodger. This is Planet Holyrood.
It's important we look at the facts. Politics has to be about service.
A modern form of national service.
The outcome, that's for the voters to decide.
Okay, with less than a week to go before polling day, the postal votes looks like it is escalating. Dozens of people are reporting they've yet to get their ballot papers after requesting a postal vote. With dozens of schools off already in Scotland, many people are heading on holiday and will be unable to use their vote. We've still got no idea how many people are affected. One council has already taken action and opened an emergency polling station. So what's gone wrong here, Andrew? What can you do if you don't have your postal vote?
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult for people at the moment. So obviously, part of the problem is that the election is happening during the Scottish school holidays. Well, for most folk, I think Aberdeen schools are still in, but and in the west of Scotland anyway, in Edinburgh as well, schools are away on holiday. So a lot of people, because the first couple of weeks, have booked to go away, especially school teachers and that, but then they haven't yet received their postal votes, even though they'd applied for them before. So it means they're not really going to get the chance to vote because a lot of them have headed off on holiday. I mean, I spoke to a couple of people yesterday. One had headed off on Wednesday, another headed off yesterday. They hadn't received their postal vote. So kind of regardless of what happens, they're not going to be able to vote. And they were in marginal seats as well. One was in East Renfrewshire. Now that's a three-way marginal between the Tories, Labour and SNP. So it could be really crucial. I mean, the only one thing that maybe could happen is if some folk who had postal votes were allowed to do proxy vote and able to get someone else to go and do their vote for them, that would be the only perhaps possible solution. But obviously, Edinburgh Council have opened this emergency polling booth pretty much where people can go, I think it's just today, and they can vote there or they can take away their postal ballot from there. Now, that's pretty unprecedented.
I actually think, like, not to contradict you, but I'm going to contradict you.
Go ahead, fire away.
No, so there is a protocol if you've applied for a postal vote and it's not turned up, you can get a sort of replacement pack. Usually I think it's, up to 4 days before the vote, up to 5 p.m. on the day of the polling day. But obviously that's not going to help people who have already gone on holiday. But I think basically, if anyone's watching this, for example, who hasn't had their postal vote, the first thing you need to do is phone up your council straight away. I think then there is a protocol where you can go to the city chambers, show an ID, and they will reissue you with a pack. But it's worth obviously calling your council, whatever one you're in, to check with them. I've been looking at this today, and a few councils seem to be suggesting it's an issue with Royal Mail. Before anyone starts the great conspiracy that Scotland's being shut out of the election, etc. I mean, it could still be a conspiracy, but I'm not a kind of conspiracy person. So there does seem to be some sort of issue with Royal Mail. Royal Mail being, urged basically to try and clear the backlog. So all of my lovely eBay parcels might be delivered, but if it means, or might be delayed, sorry, but if it means that some people get their postal votes on time, then I'll take that. Compromise.
What areas have you identified? As you said, Andrew, East Ren, there's some parts of the Highlands and Islands, is that correct? And obviously there's parts of Edinburgh, and you're seeing kind of reports in other areas of Glasgow.
There's Kinross Ross as well. They've actually put out a statement, basically saying, they've said, we've been engaging with Royal Mail locally, who've assured us that they're focusing efforts on clearing the backlog. And apparently the Electoral Management Board have said, there's going to be a review, but that's not going to be until after the election, which isn't going to help people. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly not just a one council thing.
I mean, I think a lot of this problem is, I think it was the 40s, the last time there was an election in the summer. Obviously, poster votes were not a thing then. And you're right. I mean, people have either booked to go away anyway, then tried to get a postal vote, it's not come, or they are, they're not sure quite whether they should go to a polling station if they're still going to be here, whether they can actually use their postal vote, which I don't think that they can. It's just,
so you have to cancel the postal vote if you do want to go to a polling station, but obviously you might not know until the day before if it's going to turn up.
The other thing we should say about these polling stations as well is that you will need to bring, and Hannah, you and I were talking about this morning, photographic ID for the first time. And, we were saying, Andrew, that actually we don't think this has actually been discussed enough. There's a lot of focus, obviously, on the missing postal votes, but perhaps not enough focus on you will need to bring ID or you will not get to vote.
I think that's very true. I think lots of folk who voted for years won't be aware of it. Like, I think most folk don't really pay that much attention to the news cycle all the time. So they might not have heard about this at all, and then they just go up on the day. Maybe they'll read a wee bit more about it in the campaign, and then they'll go. But as you say, it's not been mentioned much in the campaign, so that means that actually it seems that a lot of folk could go up without ID. And I think actually what will happen is a lot of folk who have ID will go, they won't know that they're meant to bring ID, they'll get turned away, and then they won't come back because they can't be bothered. I think that'll be a big thing. There will be some folk who don't have ID at all when they get turned away and they can't come back, but I think the main thing will be folk are like, well, I can't be bothered going home and coming back again. So it is going to have a big impact on turnout. I mean, I'm pretty sure Labour have said they're going to get rid of it after the election because they think it's a bit of a sham, but you don't know what it's going to be like once they're actually in. They say a lot of things beforehand. But yeah, I mean, it's really crazy. I don't fully understand why they've brought it in because
I remember they brought it in when I was working in Westminster and there was a lot of there was talk about voter fraud, essentially, and people, stealing other people's votes. This was sort of the discussion that was going around, but everyone who was against it, which was actually like a fair whack of MPs, were saying, there's a minuscule amount of fraud. It's not something that happens generally. It's not a big problem. And it's only going to, as you say, either deter people, or there are some people who don't have photographic ID. And, is that the kind of compromise that you're willing to make, just excluding a whole population just because they don't have photographic ID? So there are these different sort of mechanisms for the people who don't have photo ID. They can apply for certain cards and things, but again, as we're talking about, that requires you to have knowledge in advance, and I don't think a lot of people do.
And time as well, Hannah.
Exactly, yeah.
No, well, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, obviously, in the next few days. But last night there was quite a spectacle on television. If we think we've got a difficult choice next week, you should spare a thought for US voters who, after the Biden v. Trump TV debate, I think would probably swap places. I mean, it was the most bizarre piece of television I've probably ever seen, never mind election broadcast. I mean, you're watching two men, one who some would say should be in prison, and the other one who looks as if he's not fit to be able to actually run a country at all. So, I mean, is this really, again, the best two people that the US can find to represent them?
No, I don't. I really don't think so. I think that, I think Lorna and I talk about this fairly regularly about, you know, men who've got massive egos. And I feel like these are two men with massive egos. You know, Joe Biden maybe doesn't come across as you know, having an ego, but if you listen to people who know him, they're saying that this is about ego. You know, if he was really had the country's best interests at heart, he would step aside and say, look, it's quite obvious that, you know, and he could do that in a dignified way at this stage. But if he clings on to that, it's just going to make him look very, very selfish and like he's only doing it for himself. And of course, we know that Donald Trump is a maniac.
Do you not think, though, that the people around him should be saying, right, stop this right now. This is a problem.
Well, yeah, but then if you look on the other side of with Donald Trump, people around him were saying, you need to not do this, you shouldn't be doing that. And did that stop him? No. You know, and I think the thing that shocked people is we never thought that Joe Biden could be compared to Donald Trump in any way. Whereas with this issue, you know, I think people will actually make that comparison of two stubborn old men who are basically, you know, they just want to prove that they still got it in some way.
Well, Angela, I don't think we've ever seen some of the lines that have come from at both of them. You know, things that you never thought you would hear. I did not have sex with that porn star. You know, and Biden rambling off, you know, about his family. It was car crash.
Yeah. Oh, it was terrible. I mean, there was one ridiculous bit where they were talking about who was better at golf. I mean, that was absolute madness, and it was pretty incoherent as well. Like, you couldn't really make sense of what was going on. It's a joke. I mean, someone had said was it in the BBC debate the other night about, are these the two best candidates we've got to offer, from Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer? And you're like, they're so much better than the American candidates. Like, they're a million miles better, because at least they can string a sentence together. Like, the American candidates can't. I mean, Biden, it's crazy that he's going on, because that's what's going to let Trump win. Yeah. If Biden doesn't stand aside, Trump's surely going to win, because although Trump rambles a lot and talks a lot of rubbish.
Lies.
Yeah, he lies.
Were mounting up last night. I mean, I really wish there was literally a kind of like bell that would go off on screen.
Oh, I know.
Remember Ash Reagan's independence thermometer? You could have that, but the lie thermometer.
Yeah, it would probably be quite good for all political debates, but on this one, I mean, it's just.
I think Trump is actually now the bookie's favourite to win.
Oh yeah, he will be though.
I mean, after that performance, you know, there are Americans who will look at Trump and go, well, yes, at least he's got all his faculties.
Yeah, even though I'm not sure of that either, but he's better at stringing a sentence together, definitely. But yeah, it's just drive away all those floating voters who would probably prefer Biden on policy and on being a bit more trustworthy, although he has also lied in the past, but perhaps not on the same scale. But they're like, there's no way they can vote for him. And I think young people are basically not going to vote at all.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Surely it's going to, I mean, if I was in that situation where it was either vote for Donald Trump or vote for somebody who, quite frankly, should be in a care home, then I just wouldn't vote.
Yeah, I think that will be the case. I think there's also a problem. There's the third candidate, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Now, he is crazy, like absolutely like anti-vaxxer, conspiracy theorists. And he's going to take a decent amount of the vote because he's a wee bit younger than both of them.
Is that what you're saying, Andrew? Out of the three, he's the most sane one.
I mean, no, he's not. He's not the most sane one, but again, at least he's clear. And I don't mean like the other two aren't clear at all. And I'm definitely not encouraging people to vote for him. He's really dangerous. But I'm saying this is going to, I think he'll take a decent chunk of the vote. because I just think people will be so put off by Biden and Trump. I mean, the Democrats should just be looking at getting someone else in. There is still time. A few folk have been spoken about. I think there was a Florida Senator, Raphael Warnock, an African-American guy who really up and coming. A lot of people seem to think he would be really good. Or Gretchen Whitmer, who is the governor of Michigan. Now, either of them, they might not be that well known, but they're kind of up and coming figures and would be so much better than Biden, definitely.
Do you not think though, like Kamala Harris? You know,
where is she? She's the missing woman.
I know.
She's effectively been missing for the last few years. And, you know, you would have thought she would have been such an asset, you know, and that is bizarre to me.
You know, they made such a big deal.
Yeah.
They made such a big deal when she became the vice president, and it was like, you know, the first Black female vice president. And now to me, it comes across as a bit tokenistic if you're not actually going to give that person the opportunity to, you know, show their skill and develop themselves and basically say, right, we've got you in, so just you kind of hide in the corner now. And don't make too much of a song and dance about anything. And, you know, I just think it's a shame.
It's just very odd, to be honest. She's been missing since literally he became president. It's not just in the last few months. But I don't know, who's running as Trump's vice president? Do we know? I don't
think he's picked one yet, has he?
No, it's not fully. It's not all fully declared. I don't think yet.
That early. This TV debate is, I think, one of the earliest they've ever had. I mean, obviously the election's November. So yeah, we're probably going to be treated, the whole of the world, to be treated to a few more of these TV things. So God knows what's going to happen next.
I think it's important. It's going to have a big impact over here, though. Like, it's going to be much more difficult for Keir Starmer if Donald Trump's in the White House, because the UK and the US, there is always a very strong relationship. And if Donald Trump's like letting Putin do what he wants, if he's taking a very different stance on Gaza, it's going to be very difficult for Keir Starmer, and also it's going to distract from things that he wants to do because he's going to be constantly talking about foreign policy.
Yeah.
And also, you just cannot imagine Keir Starmer in a room with Donald Trump.
No, not at all.
No. Could you imagine Nicola Sturgeon in a room with Donald Trump?
No, but it would be interesting to watch.
Yeah, it really would be. It really, really would be. I just think Nicola Sturgeon would, you know, she would just not tolerate him at all. No nonsense.
No, I think you would see it. I think you would see it very quickly. And you know, who could blame her, to be perfectly honest? I think many of us would probably think exactly the same. Anyway, on to the SNP, who, not policy today, but unveiling their huge, great big battle bus just days before polling day. It's not a controversial camper van, but, you know, it's interesting. We've got Labour, obviously. Angela Rayner is back up in Scotland, Andrew. I know you were there, and I think you had a rather bizarre conversation with her as well about quad bikes.
Yeah, so Angela's done a couple of days in Scotland. She was in Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath yesterday, which is one of the really key Labour target seats. And then she was in Hamilton today, which the Labour candidate is Morgan McSweeney's wife. So he's the Labour's campaign director. It's Imogen Walker. So she's one of the strong candidates that they've got, and I think they pretty much expect to win there. But yeah, so Angela was doing this big speech with two battle buses, which they'd made a point that they have two of them. I think they knew the SNP were launching theirs.
Battle buses. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what they're calling them. These big red buses, and it said change on them, and that was the Labour slogan. So then Angela's talking about her new deal for workers, so the big package of workers' rights. But during the speech, she says she's talking about antisocial behaviour, and then she says, so people who are cycling up and down your high streets or whizzing in front of your front door, we're going to take their bikes and they'll be crushed within 48 hours, she said. I was there. I was among a few of the Labour candidates, a couple of MSPs, and they were all looking around them. They were like, what is she talking about? So then obviously we get a huddle afterwards where we get to ask her questions. And somebody said to like, Angela, what are you talking about? And I think that this has actually been Labour policy, that folk who are on quad bikes or dirt bikes, like off-road bikes, and have been riding them in town centres and stuff like that, they can get them seized by the police. But the problem is that they then go to public auction once they've been seized, and sometimes these people are buying them back. So Labour's policy is that they're going to just crush them to stop that from happening. But that wasn't clear at all in what Angela was saying. And I think the fact that I'm having to explain it this much shows that perhaps they've not got the messaging right.
Do you think so? I want to know if that's a problem in Scotland.
I don't think it is. I mean, so Anas Sarwar was there as well at the huddle, and he was saying, oh, it is a problem in Scotland, but I've not seen very many reports of it.
Maybe our listeners can get in touch with us if they've got specific quad bike related menace going on.
Do you not get the impression that everybody's, perhaps Angela's, maybe just had a very towards the end of the campaign?
Yeah, I think she probably doesn't know which part of the country she's in at this point. But I also think, on a sort of broader note about Labour, I don't think there's been 1 week of this campaign where either Angela Rayner or Keir Starmer hasn't actually been in Scotland.
Yeah, which is hugely interesting in itself.
Yeah.
Because it does show that what they're saying, that Scotland is pivotal to this election. They're up here and they mean business. So it's whether or not all these crazy stunts, all these things. I mean, we're talking more often than not about things that are events that are happening, or stunts that have happened, or things that people have said, more than about policies at all. And maybe it's just getting to everybody. And
I think it was interesting there, Hannah. You're like, I don't know if she knows what part of the country she's in. Well, she did have an Anas Sarwar next to her, but she didn't mention the SNP once in her speech, which was pretty interesting. I thought, if you come to Scotland and you're a Labour politician and you don't mention the SNP, who you're hoping to gain dozens of seats from, it's a bit odd, isn't it?
I think just everybody's at that point, including all of us probably, where we're just thinking, right, we've got less than a week to go now. Come on, let's just get through it, because it's been a very long but also very short campaign. It's like, I just feel like so much has happened. We've probably squeezed in the past 6 weeks the same number of political scoops as you would get in maybe 6 months normally. It's just all been compressed. But yeah, on the SNP bus, I think it's quite, I don't know, I think it's quite interesting, because obviously they do normally have some sort of bus, or Nicola Sturgeon, I think at one point, had a helicopter with her face on it. Have I imagined that?
No,
she did.
Not at all. 2016, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, but normally they have this out, all guns blazing for the start of a campaign, and Nicola Sturgeon does. Well, it was Nicola Sturgeon did the sort of photo shoot in front of the bus, and it would, that would usually kick off the campaign, and it would be all across the papers and stuff the next day. So the fact that they've waited says to me that basically they're either skint and they can't afford to have a bus for that length of time, or they're more focused on like localized campaigning instead of John Swinney going on the bus touring the country, because really that's what you would use it for, is to bring the sort of the leaders around the country. But I don't know if you saw as well today, John Swinney got a fair bit of flack because he didn't agree to do the BBC Scotland's radio phone-in. And I did think that was quite an interesting choice, because all the other party leaders have done it. It's not an easy thing to do at all. But I think it's probably one of the best opportunities for you to get your position across, because it's not a debate where people are all shouting across each other. It's actually just answering ordinary people's questions.
Why do you think he said no then, Hannah?
Well, I don't. I don't know. I mean, well, he obviously was too busy unveiling the bus.
Yeah, I think that seems to be the only, like, they've not given a proper reason why, but that seems to be the only thing, is that they decided, oh no, actually we're launching the bus today instead. Now, was that because Labour were having an event with their bus and they were like, we want to overshadow that? I don't know. But John Swinney also seemed a bit sensitive about the party finances, because he mentioned that. He said, oh, journalists keep saying we don't have any money. Well, look, here's the evidence. We've got a bus, which again, it doesn't strike you as having much confidence when he's having to demonstrate that.
Yeah, that's a bit of a strange thing to say as well, given the party's situation.
And given what's happened in the past, and given like, yeah, we have been lied to, that, you know, I think, and therefore, if we've been lied to, the public have been lied to. So, you know, I think it's touchy around the subject of money, of membership numbers, all of that kind of thing again. I do also think, but, you know, if you're going to unveil a battle bus, even in the last week, you've also got to realise that people are going to look at it and find it mildly amusing when you've got a camper van locked up, you know, by the police, which is part of, obviously, an investigation. But I just feel as if we're in the final kind of throes of a campaign, as you say, Hannah, that's felt quite long. Maybe it's because it's the time of year, maybe because we didn't expect it, Andrew. But yeah, I think
it's the time of year because we all actually think, I'd like to be sitting on a beach somewhere right now, and instead I'm having to chase around after these clowns, you know? So maybe that's just making it feel like it's a lot longer.
I don't know, Andrew. Do you feel it's a bit, it feels like this because there hasn't been a lot of like firm kind of policies on this is what we're definitely going to do, this is what we want to do from all sides, really?
Yeah, I think that's true. There were, early on, there were a few surprises from the Tories with national service and stuff like that. But Labour, we already pretty much knew what Labour were going to do, and they're not trying to give out any surprises. The SNP haven't particularly said anything different either. So yeah, I think that's part of it. We've not been waiting for policy announcements. I also think because the Conservatives have had such an awful campaign in terms of gaffes, that it's just completely distracted the whole thing. And it really has felt quite long. But I do think, right, we might wish we were on a beach, but we don't wish we were in London last week where it was 30 degrees. That would have been far too hot.
Yeah, no, London in the summer is actually stinking. It's horrible. It's like so humid, and like as soon as you go out of your house, you're just like drenched in sweat. It's horrible. But then I would like some warmth, whereas like up here, I honestly think this is one of the worst summers we've had.
You're not selling Westminster to these would-be MPs, Hannah.
Sorry. No, it's a great place. It's lovely. You'll spend hours commuting every day and, you know, paying through the nose for accommodation and people being rude to you. And, you know, but you can have a free or a cheap pint at the end of the day. So there you go.
You can do that, yes.
Hopefully we return public servants who actually want to make Scotland better, whatever party they are from. Listen, thanks Andrew, thanks Hannah for joining me on Planet Holyrood, which you can see in the Daily Record YouTube channel and listen to on Spotify.
It's important we look at the facts. Politics has to be about service.
A modern form of national service.
The outcome, that's for the voters to decide.